This is the all-new 2024 Acura TLX Type-S. And if you're a car enthusiast like me, you've probably forgot about this car. Maybe it's because the BMW 3 Series outsells the TLX about 2-to-1 in sales numbers, so we just see less of them on the road. Regardless, they've updated this car for 2024, and even though I reviewed one in 2021, it's worth revisiting. So let's take a look outside. Inside, I'll show you some of the features and technology of this vehicle. It's a sedan, so for fun, we're gonna throw a bike in the back to see if it fits. And last but not least, we're gonna take it on the road to see what it's like to drive. There are a few complaints that people like to lob at the TLX Type-S, but one of which is definitely not the looks. Unless you're a BMW fanboy, I think most neutral parties would agree that this is a better looking vehicle. It does a great job of balancing aggression with subtlety. It's about 2.2 inches wider than the standard TLX, so you're getting wider bodywork, which is something that in a BMW world you would have to step all the way up to the M3 to get. So the 340s, they're going to use a standard bodywork. This thing, you can definitely tell the wide stance from the front and the rear. It's just overall a very good looking car, and I don't see a bad angle on this thing, especially here in this brand new for 2024 urban gray pearl color. The other thing that's changed for 2024, they get a slightly different grille, as well as these PMC edition wheels are now an accessory. You don't have to get the PMC edition Type S to get these. And while they are very much traditional Japanese styling, they look fantastic on this Acura. Underneath the hood here, we have a 3-liter turbocharged V6 engine. And in many ways, that will compare to what you get in the BMW worlds of the 340s, which is the B58 engine. Of course, that one is a straight 6. This is a V6. Now, on paper, the numbers aren't too far apart. This makes 355 horsepower, but we all know that B58 is pretty underrated. So we'll be curious to see how this feels out on the road in the real world. Now, one of the biggest complaints I had about the last generation car was the 10-speed transmission, which this car still gets. So be curious to see if there are any changes there on tuning. Last but not least is fuel economy, 19 miles to the gallon city, 25 highway. As we hop in the interior, this is where some of the complaints start with this vehicle. First and foremost with this, let's be honest, relatively outdated infotainment and center stack here. This has been around for Acura for a while, and you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I think it's a miss. There are some good things, which we'll get to here, but the bad really is how you interact with this infotainment. This is not a touchscreen. Even though it looks like a touchscreen, it's not a touchscreen, and it's also very far away. So even if it was a touchscreen, you couldn't reach it. What they have here is this sort of touchpad that is a relative touchpad, whatever you would like to call it, where depending on where you touch on here, where you scroll, it will sort of highlight something for you on the infotainment screen. And Honda was trying to do something here where they were trying to make a safer system. This was in the days of early touchscreens, and I think they felt like they could do something better, but it's just frankly a miss. Can you get used to it? I'm sure you can. I'm sure TLX owners would say, oh, you know, it's intuitive now, but you could also get used to life without one arm. Would you prefer to do it? Probably not. So I think this would be better for just a regular touchscreen. The other thing here is like this drive select mode with these buttons. Why? I just don't know why. I don't get along with it very well. It's again something you can get used to, but I don't think it's a huge success in here. What is good though are all these physical buttons for your HVAC control. That part is very straightforward, and fortunately you don't have to mess with the infotainment to do it. You know, you just turn on or off the AC. There's a button right here for the fan, heated seats, cooled seats. It's all right there. So in that way, it's really good. Now the rest of this feels pretty on par with a $50,000, $60,000 car. It's extremely well made, and that's, you know, a trademark Honda and even more Acura piece there. It's just everything is screwed together extremely well. The materials feel like they're going to hold up very well as well. Like this leather or leatherette material feels very nice. I do really like the stitching and the black accents. You know, parts of this car have some really neat styling, specifically here on the door cards. Another piece that is really nice in here is actually this ELS Studio sound system. For $50,000, $60,000, I don't think you're gonna find a better one. The clarity is fantastic. It's just, if you're an audiophile, you're really gonna like that. In terms of 2024 updates, we have a new heads-up display. Gauge cluster here is digital as well. You get a surround view camera with 2024, which is something that they didn't have before. So you do get some updates in here, and I do really like the steering wheel, I must say. Nice size and shape, flat bottom. And once again, all these buttons, they really have a nice tactile feedback to them, and they do feel the relatively premium price. Now, the last piece worth mentioning are the seats, of course. These front seats are great. They're heated and cooled. They have an interesting design. I'm a pretty skinny fellow, but even me, they hold me in pretty well. They're well bolstered while also being comfortable. You know, you can adjust them in so many different ways, and you can even adjust the lumbar. Now, the back seats are a different story. While the sort of size and shape of them is just fine and comfortable, I have just enough leg room to be able to sit behind myself at 6'1", but the headroom is my biggest complaint. If you have larger passengers, the way the roof is sloped, specifically on the side, I just tend to hit my head back there, and that's a bit of a bummer compared to the German counterparts, which I fit in just fine. Now that's enough of the interior. Let's try and throw a bike in the back and see how usable this sedan is. When it comes to fitting a bike in a sedan, it's almost always a front wheel off endeavor. The TLX is hiding a surprise though. Similar to what we saw with the Elantra N not too long ago, in order to increase structural rigidity, Acura has placed a brace behind the rear seats. In the Elantra N, however, the brace is designed in such a way that you can still fit a bike over it. Not so with Acura's design. The orientation and thickness of this brace does not allow for items besides a set of maybe skis to pass through there. As always, if you enjoyed this type of content, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button and leaving a comment below so you don't miss future videos. Let's take the TLX for a drive and see what the highlights are on the road. So first and foremost, I think it's very important what lens you look at this car in. If you look at it from a super sports car, set your hair on fire, super dynamic, tons of character perspective, you're gonna be ultimately disappointed by this car. But if you're looking for a car that is a very comfortable daily driver, first and foremost, and then has sporting aspirations, then this car makes a lot more sense. So let me explain. This is ultimately set up for comfort. Starting first with the suspension. The suspension is really, to me, the highlight of this car because it offers a wide range of adjustability. It can be in comfort mode, which I keep it in all the time. Soaks up bumps great, does not beat you up whatsoever, but we're on a back road here and I'm once again in comfort mode, and it still has excellent body control. And you can, of course, firm it up here. So if I put it into Sport Plus, you can definitely feel the difference of these dampers. Now it does have an individual mode, which I really like, where if you press the Acura button, you get to choose where your dampers are set up, where your throttle response is, etc., etc. One quick note about that, it doesn't persist through key cycles, meaning that once you turn the car off and turn it back on, it goes back to normal mode, which I think is kind of a miss because it is called individual mode, and that's probably, as an individual, the mode that I want more of the time. So not a big deal, you just press the button, you go into your individual mode, you go along your way. But ultimately, like I mentioned, this suspension is, I think, the highlight and kind of captures the essence of the car because it doesn't beat you up, it's not too firm or too sporting. At the same time, it's relatively quiet in here. There is a fair bit of road noise from the tires. Wind noise is relatively low, but these tires are a bit noisy for what I would consider to be acceptable with this class. But that, coupled with the stereo, that's excellent. You can really turn your brain off and just drive this as a daily driver and be extremely comfortable. And I guess that's where some people may have a problem with it, right? If it's not too extreme or extreme enough where it's not an occasion to drive, that's where some people will say, oh, it's just not that interesting to me. So it depends what kind of person you are. Do you want a comfortable daily driver that you can go and be more than capable of carving up a canyon in, like I am now, at about, well, we're going 3 or 4 tenths, but it's good up to about 7, 8 tenths. When you start pushing it super hard, it shows a fair bit of understeer and, starts to not fall apart, but give you that indication of, hey, this is a comfortable daily driver. This is the Type S, not the Type R, right? If it's the Type R, then we could go 10 tenths. Ultimately, outside of the suspension, in terms of handling, it's incredibly flat, as I already mentioned. It's also, the steering is very direct, and it's very quick to turn in. A lot of these modern cars have this very aggressive off-center turn-in, to where it almost feels artificial, feels a bit darty. The BMWs do it as well. Honestly, most people do it. It makes it feel like the car is quicker on its feet than maybe it is. It's not to the point of being bad. There is no feel coming from the steering wheel, but that's pretty typical of all cars these days. But it is incredibly direct, as I mentioned, so that part is great. In terms of the brakes are really good, actually. They haul this car down really well, and also the pedal itself is extremely firm, and I really like how you can actually get a lot of feedback through the pedal of what's happening on the brakes, a lot more so than the steering wheel. So all in all, the dynamics of the car are pretty good for up to a certain point, right? The engine itself, how can we get this far without talking about the engine? It's incredibly effective. 355 horsepower, it feels like that. It's not crazy fast. It certainly won't feel as fast, or doesn't feel as fast as something like a 3 Series with a B58 engine. That engine is underrated. This feels like a modern turbocharged engine where there's quite a bit of torque down low. It does rev out, but you're not chasing the red line like you are in old Hondas. So in some ways, that's a bit of a knock against it. But we live in modern times. Things are turbocharged for efficiency's sake. That's just frankly how it goes. I would say the engine's good. It has a warm character to it. Doesn't make the best sound ever, but it's nice. It's certainly better than a 4-cylinder like is in a lot of cars. I think the transmission is probably where this car falls down compared to a lot of the competition. You have the ZF 8-speed that is in the BMW products, and that's an excellent transmission, even though it is more traditionally torque converted. It's not a dual clutch. And then there are, of course, other cars that have dual clutches, which are super quick to shift. And this car, it's fine for around town. The shifts are okay in speed at best. The biggest problem is it just doesn't really do what you tell it to do. It won't hold a gear. It will shift even if you're in manual mode. And to me, that's like a cardinal sin of a sports car. Even though it's an automatic, if I put it in manual mode, it should do what I tell it to do. I mean, obviously don't over rev the engine, but hold the gear if I want it to. Don't automatically upshift for me. So that's a bit of a bummer part about this product. It's not the end of the world, but once again, this is a fun daily driver, not a sports car first. It's plenty smooth around town. So in that aspect, it's very good. So summing this thing up, this infotainment, not the best in the world. As I mentioned, you kind of probably get used to it, but you do at least have a really solidly built car. It's probably going to hold up pretty well, as most Honda and Acura products do. It has the capability of giving you a good time on a road like this, but first and foremost, it just is a comfortable sedan. So if that fits your lifestyle, I think you kind of have to be a Honda or Acura fanboy to really appreciate this. If you're a little more brand agnostic like I am, it's hard to say buy this, because objectively, once again, the BMWs of the world equivalent are going to be faster. They're going to have better shifting transmissions. They're probably going to be a little more dynamically fun on a road like this. But once again, you have unique styling with this vehicle. You have an excellent sound system, and it does step out from the crowd, or you know, gives you a sense of uniqueness, just because I don't see many on the road. I think from a used value, they're great used value, because I've seen some prices that make me think, you know, that's a pretty good deal. New, it's a little harder pill to swallow. And like I said, you have to really kind of be a Honda or Acura fanboy in order to enjoy this. But if you are, I think, frankly, you would enjoy it. So definitely by no means a bad car by any means. It's just for a very specific buyer. And if you look at it that lens, it will make sense. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. Consider hitting that subscribe button, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Peace.